Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. Temperatures in the high 70s, and I am walking home from the train. It's the first time walking home from the train since last May. And I am happy to be back recording for you on my normal schedule. As you know, I took a significant break, and so I have plenty of games to talk about. So every other or every third episode for quite a while is definitely going to be a board game espresso. So let's get started. Board game espresso is, of course, the format in which I give brief discussion to 3 games I've tried for the first time recently, and 1 game I revisited from the past. This is an opportunity to reflect on some games I've played, but do keep in mind, these are first impressions. So these are not games I've played even kind of a lot. Most of them are 1 or 2 plays only, and so you should take anything I say about them with a grain of salt. I will also remind you that I am part owner of a board game company, and so I guess technically I have incentive to downplay other board games. I'm not really sure what the bias exactly would be, but I do want you to know there might be some implicit bias there. All right, with that out of the way, let's chat about Seventh Continent. Seventh Continent is a game that I had heard about a lot in the year it came out, which I believe was 2017. It came out as part of a Kickstarter and then has been kicking around ever since. I played it as, I picked it up using some birthday money as a game for my wife and I to play now that we are done with Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective and similar games. The premise of Seventh Continent is that you went to a continent and then you came back home and you found yourself cursed. So you have to go back and resolve the curse before time runs out. I think that's the premise. There are several different chapters of the game, and each chapter, I think, is a standalone thing that you play. We played and lost, so I don't really know how the second chapter works, because we're going to have to redo since we lost the first chapter. The gameplay is relatively simple. There are a whole bunch of cards that are all numbered, and you lay the cards out using iconography to figure out the way that the cards are laid out. And then you have a little marker to indicate where you are, I think. And then you can resolve story beats by looking up numbers, which let you then read entries in a book. And those sometimes involve you drawing more cards as well. The game, it's got a sort of choose your own adventure kind of style to it. There's not a ton of game here, so much as it is an adventure story that involves choosing and reading things, although you do have to decide when to spend your relatively limited turns and resources. You can't just look at everything, as we found out in our first play. The art is nice but functional. It feels a little bit like the art from the much more recent game, The Guild of Merchant Explorers. It's sort of line art with a slightly cartoonish vibe, or like a cell animated vibe. Not cartoonish though. And the storyline is pretty interesting. There are some really neat art elements that when you're looking at the cards, you will notice things that you maybe didn't notice before. And as you interact with things, you then draw new cards that you put over the old cards to represent the changes in the world as you encounter them. All in all, it's a pretty neat system, and I liked the story in the first chapter. We did not do very well. I think we lost about 2/3 of the way through. But I'm looking forward to trying it again sometime and seeing if we can do better on our next play. So that is Seventh Continent, published by Serious Pulp, designers Ludovic Rowdy and Bruno Sauter. All right, next up to talk about is Fiction. Fiction is a new publication from, they used to be BoardGameTables.com. Now they are All Play, I think. And it was designed by Peter C. Hayward. Where did I know that name from? Oh, he's the person who designed That Time You Killed Me. That's the other game that he's best known for, although he has 42 entries on Board Game Geek, so he may have other games I've played. Anyhow, fiction is most easily described as competitive Wordle. In fiction, you have one player who is the clue giver, and the other players are all the guessers, and you have a Wordle puzzle. I think it is actually identical to a Wordle puzzle. I think it's 5 letters, if I recall. And it might be 9 guesses instead of 7, but otherwise it's pretty similar. And what you can do, or what you do is each turn you're going to take a guess. Oh, and at the beginning you get a category, which helps you a little bit in terms of your starting point. And then you take a guess, and then you get the usual kinds of clues that you would get for Wordle. You get this letter is in the puzzle and in the right spot. This letter is in the puzzle but not in the right spot. These letters are not in the puzzle, that sort of thing. The big difference is each time the clue giver gives you an answer, they have to lie about something. So one of the answers is a lie in every single response. Now you get, I think, 1 or 2 truth tokens that you can use to put on a specific letter and have the clue giver tell you if that letter is true or not. So you can kind of suss out a little bit where they're misleading you. But then basically the idea is, as a group, you are going to do your best to find and guess the word that the clue giver is working with, and that's how you play fiction. This is a fine game. It taps into the shared deduction space, and if you like word games like Wordle, this one definitely would fit the bill for that. The art is passable. I mean, that's nothing special, but it's not unpleasant either. The theme is somehow around books, and so on your turn, if you're the clue giver, you're going to draw a couple cards and choose one of them to be the category for the questions you're giving. If you get a chance to play fiction, I do recommend it. I'm not sure I would recommend buying it because it is so similar to Wordle that it's basically just playing competitive Wordle, which I like solving a Wordle on my own. I don't know that I need to spend a lot of time talking it over with other people, but if that sounds fun to you, you should give it a try. That's Fiction by designer Peter Hayward and All Play Games. All right, I thought I would take a minute to talk about a game that I got out of the dust recently. I mentioned this a little bit a while ago on the July Top of the Stack podcast. This is Tussie, Mussie. Tussie, Mussie is, of course, an Elizabeth Hargrave game published by Button Shy. And in Tussie, Mussie, you play Victorian courtiers giving flowers to one another. If you read the instruction booklet to Tussie, Mussie, and you're a dope about the Victorian traditions as I am, or perhaps you already know this, Victorians often gave flowers, and each flower was known to have a certain meaning. So giving a carnation meant something different than giving a red rose, which meant something different than giving a tulip. Each flower had its own meaning, and what flower you gave to somebody passed along a message. In the game of Tussie, Mussie, you play players who are competing to earn points from taking and playing flower cards. Each turn, you're going to draw 2 cards. You're going to put one face up and one face down, and then your opponent gets to pick which one of them they want to take, and they're going to keep it in the direction it is. So if you put a card face down and a face up, and they take the face down one, it stays face down in their tableau. Now, as far as I remember, a card being face down just makes it harder to see. It doesn't affect its scoring at all. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you turn all the cards face up when it's time to score them. And then the idea is you just do that until you go through the 18 cards, or maybe half of the 18 cards, and then you score however many cards you got. And you get points for the different kinds of flowers. Each have a scoring condition on them that lets them score in a different way based on combination of flowers or flowers that you have and so on. They did release an expansion wallet of modules for the game as well. I have not had an opportunity to try those, but we did play the base game of Tussie, Mussie a couple times on our trip. This is a cute little game. I don't know that I would go out of my way to buy it again, but it is a nice what's the word I'm looking for? Diversion from something like Quicks or Lost Cities, which are our usual go-to two-player games. This gives you just a slightly different feeling and is pretty fun. So if you get a chance to try Tussie Mussie, I recommend. That is my Out of the Dust game. Finally, the last game I want to talk about today is The Gardens. Now, The Gardens is a game from designers Matt Dunstan and Brett Gilbert, whom you know I adore. They are best known perhaps for Elysium, but they have worked together on a number of different titles. I have their Chocolate Factory game, and I have Costa Rica, which they published together. And I feel like I have one more game from them as well. Raids. So they have worked together quite a few times. I also have some games separately by one or the other of them. I believe that the Adventure Inc. games are from Phil Walker Harding and Matt Dunstan, I believe. So in The Gardens, you play gardeners at the Sydney Botanical Gardens in Australia. That's the theme. You each have a single tile that you're going to use to lay out cards. It's similar to the starting board of Santa Monica. It's a long, thin tile that is about the width of a card, but it is taller than the card. In Santa Monica, the starting tile is double the height of a card. In The Gardens, it's triple, so you have 3 rows of cards. In the game, there is a market of cards that get put out, and each turn you're going to take one card from the market. On your turn, you're going to take a card from the market, and you're going to add it either to the left or to the right of your board, and you're going to put it in the row that it belongs in. Each card definitely clearly goes in the top row, the middle row, or the bottom row. You have to add it next to any other cards that you've already got in that row, and there's a limit to how wide your board can be. I think it's maybe 12 cards on each side, so 4 columns deep on each side of your board. When you play the card, you then move the pedestrian in that row from where they are to where you put the card. If they pass any of the significant symbols on the card that you played, they score points. For instance, I think there's ginkgo trees. There are ginkgo trees in one of the things I think is ginkgo trees. I might be wrong about that, but let's say it is. So if you take a ginkgo tree card and put it in your garden, then the little pedestrian in that row moves from the card they're on to the new card you just played. And if they pass any ginkgo trees, then you score 1 point for each tree that they passed. There's also a different scoring mechanism for fountains, and a different one still for these little rivers that appear, and a different one still for benches and statues. And so there's a bunch of different ways that you score points during the game. Each round lasts 3 card takings until everyone has taken 1 card from each row and added it to their board. Once everyone has had 3 turns, then the next round occurs and you deal out another series of cards. The game is over once everyone has filled their tableau, and then there's some final scoring for some of the different types. The Gardens is a beautiful, carefully stylish game with really nice art and pretty solid graphic design. It's relatively simple as far as gameplay goes. I wouldn't necessarily say entry level, but very teachable. With a variety of different scoring conditions, there's a lot to grab onto, and you can kind of focus on one thing, and sometimes you can get a lot of points from it, especially if your competitors aren't paying attention to or don't care that you're focusing on one particular thing. There's a little bit of hate drafting involved in the game. You can see what other people are working on, and it's really easy to sabotage them. For instance, if someone else has taken 2 vertical streams, one for the top row and one for the bottom row, you could take the last vertical stream for the middle and leave them without a connector, in which case they don't score points for those. That kind of thing is relatively easy to do and pretty fun. All in all, The Gardens is an enjoyable game. I would put it in the sort of middle category, neither too hard nor too easy. Enjoyably fun and worth checking out. I'm not sure I'd recommend buying it sight unseen, but definitely give it a play if you get a chance, or at least check it out at the store. Again, that's from Matt Dunstan and Brett Gilbert and Grail Games. Well, this brings me to the end of my podcast. I'm glad to be back, glad to be talking games with you. Hopefully this was a fun way to hear about a couple new games I've been playing. If you'd like to let me know what you've been playing, I would love to know. You can post those ideas on Board Game Geek and Guild 3269. You could send me an email, brendan@rattleBoxGames, or a message in Board Game Geek to Wombat929. Honestly, I'm probably more likely to see the Wombat929 one. That I'm not as attentive as my email as I should be. If you would like to play a game with me, I am Wombat929 on Board Game Arena and yukata.de. I'd be happy to play a game with you in either of those places, although I usually play asynchronously, so you will have to take turns. Well, I hope that this was enjoyable to you, and I hope that you've had a pleasant gaming week, and I look forward to next time I talk to you. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.